Now, in this video itself, I'm going to share with you the three key characteristics of a staff resource plan. And with these three key characteristics itself, you will then be able to ensure that your staff resource plan is robust. Let's get to it. So when we are looking at a staff resource plan, one of the key questions that we want to ask ourselves is what are some of the characteristics that we have to see in a good staff resource plan? And when we talk about good staff resource plan, essentially we are looking at a few things. Number one is that the staff resource plan actually it's a conduit between your strategic plan and your staff systems. Now, what do I mean? Let me explain that a little bit more. Now, you always start off with, before you start doing your staff resource plan, you always start off with looking at your strategic plan. And with the strategic plan itself, you want to ask yourself, what are your school goals and objectives? And also, you also want to know, like, what is the school's direction for that planning cycle itself? What is the focus of the school? And so once you have that down on paper, and once you have that clarity of where the school is going, then you can embark on crafting your staff resource plan. And this is where you want to ask yourself, what kind of staff must we have so that we are able to help the school achieve its goals and objectives? And so when you look at what kind of staff must we have, essentially we're looking at two broad areas. And these two broad areas are essentially, staff competency and staff engagement. So when we talk about staff competency, we say that what kind of skill set, what kind of experience, and perhaps even mindset must our staff have in order to help us achieve our goals and objectives. Now, on the other hand, you also want to make sure that staff are well taken care of, so they are highly engaged and they are not just showing up for work because they have to, but they are doing it because they want to and they are highly motivated to do that, right? Now, and so once you have defined, what kind of staff must we have, then the next part, it's really to look at what are some of the systems, what is the staff systems that you must have. And so here, when we take a look at the staff system, what essentially we're looking at is, the in the area of learning and development. So learning, because we want to equip our teachers with the necessary skills. Development, we want to make sure that we develop them into a competent professional. In addition to that, we also want to look at their well-being as well as their motivation. So the first characteristic that you want to ask yourself is, it's your staff resource plan that conduit between the strategic plan of your school as well as your staff system. Now let's take a look at characteristic number two. Now, characteristic number two is that in a good staff resource plan, you always must have two prong. Now, what I mean by two prong here is essentially as follows. Imagine if your staff resource plan it's only focused on equipping your teachers with the necessary skill sets to be able to perform effectively in the classroom. Now, and that's all you are concerned with. What that is saying is that, I just want you to be able to do your job, but I really do not care about your well-being. So when you think about your staff resource plan, think of it as both a top down as well as a bottom up approach. Because from the top down is where you say that these are the goals and objectives that my school wants to achieve. And so, in order for my school to achieve that, what are the training and development that my teachers must go through so that they are able to equip themselves and become competent in those areas? Now, at the same time, you also want to take the bottom up approach because you also want to put your pounds on the ground and to be able to ascertain, what is the level of engagement is like in the school, right? And so you want to look at, are people happy being where they are? Are they satisfied? Are they overworked? Are they, is their well-being being taken care of? So that's the two prong aspect of it. Now, so one way of looking at learning and development is I like to look at it from an angle of a pyramid. So At the lowest level, at the ground level, it's where opportunities are given to everyone in terms of learning and development. Everyone gets a chance to learn and grow, and as well as everyone gets a shot at career development. Everyone has the right to aspire. Now, that being said, not everyone will be developed to the next level, which is talent management. And that this is where perhaps the individual it's not ready, or perhaps the organization is not ready to develop them. But we want to still, at the base level, we still want to identify people with unique talents or talents that can be developed. And so once you've identified this group of people, and because they are ready as well as the organization is ready, you put them on the talent management development program. And when they have gone through that series of tasks and roles, and they are deemed to be suitable for consideration for next appointment, that's where you put them in the succession leadership pipeline, right? And so this is where you have a pipeline of people who have gone through the talent management, and now they are ready and they are able to take on a bigger responsibility, so they come into the pipeline. And of course, once the opportunities open up, that is where you want to appoint them as leaders officially. So this is one way of looking at both a top down as well as a bottom up approach. Now the other thing that you want to look at staff engagement, and this to do with particularly with well-being and motivation. It's You want to look at it from the angle of your school culture. Now, what does school culture means? What does an organizational culture means? Well, essentially what it means is that when you walked into the organization, when you interact with the organization at every touch point itself, you would get a sense that this is what the organization stands for, this is what the organization believes in, and this is what's important to the organization. And so the best way to do that is you go straight into your values, right? What are the values in your organization? Because you see, values are internal, right? And the only way to observe the values being demonstrated is when it's manifested in terms of certain behaviors. So, for example, when we say that we are a one of our values is student centricity, then obviously you want to see every program that you have, it's being tailored or customized or designed from the perspective of the learner, right? So the way to think about building the culture and to be able to develop that whole engaged environment, it's to go down to the values, and how you operationalize this is basically in a three-prong approach. So the first prong, essentially, it's you want to put in place certain programs. Now the whole idea with this program is that you want to encourage a certain set of behaviors. So if you recall, back in the 70s and the 80s, Singapore was known as the land of campaigns. Why? Because we've got literally campaigns for just about everything, right? And so those campaigns are essentially programs to encourage a certain set of behaviors. And so these are the programs that you would initiate in the first phase of the implementation process itself, to kind of encourage people to involve and to demonstrate and to manifest these desired behaviors. Now, at certain point in time, these programs are going to become a mainstay. In other words, even without these programs in place, you are still going to see this set of behaviors becoming a commonplace. And when you see that, that's essentially you are able to say that, well, it's become common practice. So with common practice, what you want to do is that you want to put in place platforms and structures to support these practices. Now, of course, once you have all these structures and platforms in place, you will come to a point whereby you expect people to be demonstrating this set of behaviors. So, for example, if I join your school and your school have a specific culture, it will be non-negotiable whereby, when I join, I have to embrace, I have to assimilate myself to that culture itself. So that is where it becomes a policy, and a policy it's for the purpose of reinforcing the desired behaviors to sustain the desired culture. So policies could be, for instance, it get feature or it get infused into performance management, and it becomes an expected behavior of the person itself, right? And so that is the second characteristic of your staff resource plan. So the third characteristic is that, in a good staff resource plan, it has to be what we call, it has to take a system dynamics approach. Now, what exactly is a system dynamics approach? The best way to think of it is this particular cycle itself. It's called a PDCA cycle, or Deming's wheel. Now, for those of us who have been in civil service long enough, we're probably quite familiar with this thing called work improvement teams, or WITS for short. So the core idea with WITS is that every week or every month we meet and we discuss work problems. We try to identify what might be the solution, and we implement those solutions to address those work problems itself. So that is the core idea of the PDCA cycle. Now, this whole premise of it is going to lead you to continuous improvement. However, the one thing that is purely lacking in this model itself is that if we do not if we only focus on making improvements in that manner, we will probably see very incremental improvements, if at all, right? And so this is where, in another different approach, it's a probably a most superior approach, and this is what we call the double loop learning. Now, the double loop learning essentially says that, with everything that we implement, we have a set of assumptions, whether we are aware of it or not, right? And so, with that set of assumptions, we then have a set of strategies and techniques that we will implement. So let's say that, back when I was in school, the assumption of my teacher was that, when the child is seated down, it's quiet, it's orderly, the class is orderly, and they are looking at me, it means that learning is taking place. That may be the assumption at a point in time. And so if that's the assumption of learning, what that means essentially is that, the teacher will be doing a lot of what we call chalk and talk, right? It will be a lot of chalk and talk. And that's what they will implement, because that was the assumption at the point in time. Now, when we come to the end of the year and we realize that, wow, with chalk and talk, the kids doesn't quite make the grade. And so what do? We go back and review it. And when we review it, we may say that, wow, perhaps we need to do more of the same thing, which is essentially remediation classes. And so we do that, and perhaps by doing that, we get an incremental improvements in their results, but we probably would not see a breakthrough until and unless we go back and rethink about our assumptions. So now our assumption is that, well, children do not have to be absolutely quiet and orderly in the classroom. Discussions can take place, they can talk to each other, and learning can be collaborative, learning can be, social. And so, with those assumptions, our strategies and our techniques for teaching would have changed, right? And those techniques and strategies would be something that it's really, really different from what we used to do in the past. And this is only possible with the change of assumption, of with a new set of assumptions that we bring in. So the way to think about how you're going to factor it into your staff resource plan is as follows. So first thing first, as always, you always start off with the school strategic plan. You look at the goals of your school. What does the school want to achieve? And then you ask yourself this key question: what kind of staff must we have? And that will determine what kind of staff goals would you be looking at. Now, once you have the goal, the next thing essentially is to ask yourself, what is our planned approach, right? And this goes into what is our belief about how things work, what is our framework, what is our approach, what are our assumptions. Once you have that clearly spelled out, then you can talk about the implementation. How are we going to implement this? What kind of strategies are we going to have? Right. And of course, once you've implemented it, the next thing that you really need to do is you need to review, right? You need to review your goals. You also need to go back and review if these goals are working, and if not, what you can do about it, right? So, my friends, these are the three key characteristics of staff resource planning. So, the question I want you to ponder over is the following. Review your own staff resource plan right now and determine which of these characteristics is missing. Which one of these characteristics is missing, and then decide on how you are able to introduce that into your staff resource plan. And once you've done that, what does the process look like? And so, if you have been wondering, like, how exactly do you formulate your staff resource plan? Is there a step by step process to kind of guide you to do that? Then this video it's for you. So, what we want to do in this video is I would like to share with you the process of staff resource planning. How does it look like? And once you look at it, I think you will find it very, very familiar because it's very similar to the strategic planning process, except this is purely focusing on staff. So, the starting process of your staff resource planning is the following, right? You always want to start off with looking at your school goals and your school direction. So look at a strategic plan, look at where your school is going, what is the direction of the school, what is the focus of the school, what are some of the goals that your schools have. Now, once you know those are the focus, those are the direction, and those are the goals of the schools, the next step is really to ask yourself, what kind of staff must we have, or what must our staff look like in order to be able to help us achieve those goals? And so this is really crafting, how you want your staff to be like. Because with that kind of stuff, this is how it's going to give you the possibility of achieving your organizational outcome. Now, once you have those goals, the next step is really to ask yourself, how do I know when I've arrived at those goals? And this is where the measures come into place. And so, with the measures itself, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the KPIs. We are also looking at the targets, right? And once you have those measures in place, the next logical step is to ask yourself, how am I going to get there? And this is going to be guided by the framework and approaches that you have about staff development. And this is how it's going to help guide you in terms of writing the strategies and initiatives. And so once you have the strategies and initiative written out, the next logical step is to implement that. So just like when you are a department head, you would have a department action plan. So in your realm of control, you would be looking at a staff action plan. So, in other words, your staff resource plan, it's like the staff trust in your school strategic plan, right? Because that is the aspect of staff that is going to support the implementation of the strategies of the school so that you are able to achieve the goals and the objective of the school. And so this staff trust has to be cascaded down into an action plan, and we will show you what exactly it looks like later on, right? So that would be the action plan that you would have. And of course, once you have the action plan at the end of every planning cycle, it is always best practice that you must evaluate and review your plans as well as your process. And in that process of doing so, you would definitely be asking yourself, what kind of improvements can we have? And that's exactly what I would like you to do next as you are looking at your own process for formulating your staff resource plan, right? I would like you to review your process for formulating staff resource plan against the one that I just shared with you, and perhaps identify at least one way that you can improve on your staff resource planning process. Now, once you have that, I will see you in the next